A great teacher once said something that really sticks with you. Your potential is limitless. You just need the right map. Well, today, we're going to explore the incredible map that our nation's founders left for us. This is the Denrar method, living the subject.
So, today we're decoding a really fascinating part of the Indian Constitution. I want you to think of it as, well, a secret blueprint for the country's future. It's this set of instructions called the Directive Principles. Just imagine that for a second. Not just a book of rules, but a genuine, ambitious to-do list, handed down by the founders themselves. A list that basically says, okay, here's the kind of country we dream of. Now go build it. And that's exactly what we're digging into today.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start with what these principles even are. Think of them as a moral compass. Then we'll get into why they matter, even if you can't sue over them. We'll see how they've shaped actual laws, tackle that classic conflict between individual rights and the greater good, and finally, wrap it up with the grand vision they're all pointing towards.
Okay, let's jump right into that first big idea, the moral compass. What exactly are these directive principles that are supposed to guide the entire nation?
So at their very core, they're exactly what they sound like, directives. Think of them as the Constitution's North Star, tucked away in Part 4. Now, they aren't laws that you or I can go enforce in a court, but they are the fundamental ideals that the government is supposed to keep in mind every single time it creates a new policy.
And these ideas didn't just pop out of nowhere. The folks who framed our Constitution were looking all over the world. They drew inspiration from Ireland's Constitution, from the powerful ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity that came out of France, and of course, from Mahatma Gandhi's own vision for a just and self-reliant India.
So, let's move on to how this whole thing becomes the nation's official to-do list. And maybe more importantly, why these principles really matter. And here it is, the million-dollar question, right? Unlike your fundamental rights, you can't just walk into a courtroom and say, hey, this directive principle isn't being enforced. They're non-justiciable. So if they don't have any legal teeth, what's their actual power? What's the point?
Well, this is the really cool part. Their power isn't legal, it's moral and political. First, they're a pledge, a promise, from the founders to all of us. Second, they're a guide for lawmakers. But most importantly, for you and me, they're a yardstick. We can hold them up against any government and ask, so are you actually living up to this promise you're supposed to be keeping?
Ultimately, every single one of these directives, they all point in one direction, the creation of what's called a welfare state. And that basically means a country that is actively working to make sure all its citizens, not just a lucky few, are doing well both socially and economically. Okay, enough theory, let's get down to brass tacks. How does this blueprint from the 1950s actually turn into policies that affect our lives today? Let's see these principles in action.
One of the biggest goals, right off the bat, is to use the state's power to build a society that's more fair, more equal, more just. Let's see how that's actually played out.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The Constitution said the state should provide education, and what did we get? The Right to Education Act. It pushed for the Gandhian idea of village self-governance, and boom, the Panchayati Raj system. See, every single one of these policies aimed at social upliftment has its roots right here, in this foundational blueprint.
But hey, the blueprint isn't just about social justice. It's just as focused on economic welfare. This is the idea that the nation's wealth should work for everybody, not just a handful of people at the top.
Just look at this number. It's staggering. Over 20 crore. That's 200 million. A directive to reduce economic inequality led to programs like the Jan Dhan Yojana, which brought hundreds of millions of people into the formal banking system for the very first time. I mean, that's giving them security, a foothold in the economy. It's huge.
And this isn't some new idea either. It goes way back. Think about the land reforms that got rid of the old feudal zamindari system, or the nationalization of banks to make sure that money served the common good. Even laws like the Minimum Wage Act, they all come from this same constitutional to-do list.
And just look at the massive scale of this stuff. Take the National Food Security Act. It's a law that provides subsidized food grains to, get this, 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population. That is a gigantic undertaking, and it's a direct result of the state fulfilling its duty to look after its citizens' well-being.
But this is where things can get, well, really complicated. What happens when the government's duty to the entire community clashes with the rights of one single person?
I mean, think about it. If the government needs to buy some land to build, say, a hospital or a road that's going to benefit thousands of people, what happens to the property rights of the person who owns that land?
This is where these two parts of the Constitution can really butt heads.
This table breaks down that tension perfectly. On one side, you've got legally enforceable fundamental rights for individuals. On the other side, you have these non-enforceable directives for the state. And here's the crucial thing to remember. The Supreme Court has basically said that while both are super important, a balance has to be struck. In some cases, for the greater good of the whole community, laws made to follow these directive principles can be considered valid, even if they seem to clash with an individual's rights.
So all of this brings us to our final section, and really, the ultimate destination on this entire constitutional map.
And this is it. This is the end goal that all these principles are driving toward, a welfare state. And it's such a profound idea. It says that the state isn't just a referee blowing a whistle. It has a positive duty, a real responsibility, to actively work towards social and economic justice for every single one of its people.
So, I'll leave you with this final thought. This blueprint is over 7 decades old. It was written for a brand new, independent nation. The real question for us, and for our country's leaders, is this. How should this moral compass, this incredible, ambitious to-do list, continue to guide the builders of India here in the 21st century?